Welcome to Beyond the Chutes is presented by Parasite Systems. I'm your host, Doug Simcox, and today I'm recording in Taylorsville, Kentucky. I hope that you're having a great day wherever you are with whatever you may be working on today. And today we've got a very special guest. He is an 11-time steer wrestling world champion and is the general manager of the International Professional Rodeo Association. It is my pleasure to welcome back Mr. Dale Yerigan to BTC. How are you doing today, Dale? How are things?
I'm great, Doug, and I appreciate you having me back on to kind of follow up on some earlier conversation we had and touch on some new things.
Absolutely. I tell you, we've got some listener questions from your last episode, all about steer wrestling. We're going to dig into your role as general manager, if that's all right. Talk a little bit about the history of the IPRA, its innovations in the sport of rodeo. We'll talk about the International Finals Rodeo and Rodeo Logistics purchase earlier this year of the International Professional Rodeo Association. But first, all of our listeners are really interested in traveling stories. I had Robbie Hodges. You know Rockin' Robbie Hodges? Do you remember him?
I know Robbie well.
He was on here, and he wanted me to ask if you might remember a story when him and Cody Sosabe were traveling with you, something about ho-hos hidden under a pillow and getting caught. Do you remember anything like that?
Well, with Cody Sosabe, there was something about that era of bareback riders. So Robbie Hodges and Cody Sosabe were both bareback riders traveling in the IPRA at the same time. And Cody traveled with me a lot, Robbie a little bit, but Cody, he always said he liked traveling with steer wrestlers because they stop and eat a lot. And Cody, who people will know now as a rodeo clown,
mm-hmm.
and is fairly large in stature. Is that safe to say?
I would say, yeah.
He was much slimmer and trimmer as a bareback rider, and he actually was a world champion bareback rider, and I think about 93. And so, but you can imagine with guys like that traveling that were on the competition side. I mean, they were already clowns before they started painting their faces and getting paid to be clowns, and so it was pretty entertaining on the rodeo trail with guys like that who now make their living painting their faces and being funny at the rodeo. But they were doing it for free back then, and they were pretty entertaining. They would take guitars with them and sing and play, and it's there was quite an adventure with guys like that.
So the ho-hos under his pillow and getting caught, do you remember that story?
Well, I don't remember exactly what happened with the ho-hos, but Cody would be bad to have food stashed,
okay.
And so he wasn't going to go without. So I don't know that he got in trouble for having the ho-hos because he was on his own as far as his own weight and training regimen.
Okay.
But and who knows, he may have made a mess in the camper or something with him,
okay.
with the food hid out. There was another guy that was traveling with me, Joel Chaffin, who qualified for the IFR and the steer wrestling. He was kind of having some hard times and wasn't winning a lot, so he was trying to be very frugal with his money. And so we stopped at a truck stop, and they had on the bargain bin there, I never forget, they had a big package of Fig Newtons for nearly nothing. It was marked way down. I don't know if they were out of date or what,
right.
what the story was. So he bought a big package of Fig Newtons and slid them under the back seat of the truck and had them stashed to snack on because he was light on funds for eating. And so Milburn Uthier, who another bareback rider that traveled with me for a while, he was sleeping in the back seat, and he just happened to stumble onto him, and he ate those Fig Newtons. And when Joel got up and got out of the camper the next day, and it was time for a snack, and he got in there to get his Fig Newtons out, the look on his face when he realized that the package was empty and Milburn had eaten his Fig Newtons was one of the most dejected looks I've ever seen on a human face.
Oh, no.
And then we made sure that Joel got something to eat.
Okay.
So we weren't going to be that hard on him. But
yeah.
It was pretty comical that he was just the letdown. You thought somebody ran over his dog when he found his empty package of Big Newtons.
Big Newtons. I love it. I love it. Well, if you can think of any stories maybe about Robbie as we go through today, please feel free to step up and share it.
I will. And Robbie wasn't with us on this trip. One of the kind of craziest things that happened was when they left my horses at the gas station, things like that, and we drove long ways without them and had to turn around and go back and get them, and everything was fine.
You left horses. They left horses behind at a gas station.
Yeah, so this is before cell phones or any of that stuff, and GPS and whatnot, and so traveling all night long, all day and night to get somewhere, and so there was a whole bunch of us traveling together in my rig, and had my steer wrestling and hazing horse, and the night before this happened, when we were all awake when we left the rodeo, and everybody's talking and telling old stories, and John Crater had got in with us and for a little while, and right at the end of his bareback riding career, and so he was telling stories about guys that he rodeoed with and the pranks they pulled on each other and so on and so forth, and so then we got ready. I got ready to lay down for a while, so a couple other guys started driving. Richard Sims and Jim White were going to drive so I could sleep for a while. And so I'm back there in the camper, and all of a sudden, several hours go by, and all of a sudden, they're waking me up, or they're in there trying to get John awake, and said, "Where's the horses?" And, or John had started driving by then. He's like, "Where's the horses?" And the first thing I thought was, well, they're playing a joke on me, right? They're trying to get me excited.
Yeah.
And so then I could tell by the tone in John's voice, he wasn't kidding, or I didn't think he was. So I had a 2-horse inline trailer at the time. And so I jumped out and I ran back there. We're on the side of the interstate and there's no horses in the trailer.
Oh, wow.
And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they fell out on the road. You're thinking all kinds of terrible things.
Yeah.
And so as we kind of get calmed down a little bit and get those guys awake, and they said, well, didn't you load the horses before you started driving? And John's like, what are you talking about? Well, they had stopped for gas.
Yeah.
And they were tired. So they woke John up and said, can you drive?
Yeah.
And he said, sure. So he got up. Well, he didn't even look in the trailer. He just got in and started driving. And so somebody flashed the lights and pulled up alongside of him on the interstate and said, I don't know if you lost anything, but your trailer door's open.
Oh my goodness.
So he pulled over.
Wow.
So after the initial shock of, they didn't fall out on the road. They're at a gas station somewhere. They had pulled in there and unloaded the horses and walked them and tied them to a little fence behind the gas station and hung up a bucket of water for them. And then didn't tell John that the horses were back there, and he just took off and started driving, inline trailer, no weight on the tongue of the trailer or anything. And so he didn't know that the trailer was empty.
Mm-hmm.
And so back then the truck we were driving had 2 gas tanks on it. So one was about empty. And so John said, well, nobody remembered where we stopped. It wasn't really out of town. It was just a little gas station along the highway. Wow. And, they all kind of looked the same.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And so John said, I never forget, John said, well, this tank's just about empty. I guess we'll turn around and switch tanks. And then, when it starts getting down there, we'll look. And, it sounded crazy, but really that was the most sensible thing to do at that point. And so we turned around and went the other way and switched tanks. And so when we got down to about a quarter of a tank, we started stopping. And I think about the second or third exit that we got off, there they were. And we pulled in the gas station. Well, of course, now we're out of gas again. So, we've driven 150 miles, one way and 150 back. So we're 300 miles later in 6 hours or 5, whatever it was. And so now it's daylight. And so we pull in there and goodness. I go around there and there's the horses just standing there looking at me like, where you been?
Yeah,
and so I load the horses. John fills up with gas, and there was a young guy working in the gas station, and I'm loading the horse up, and he comes out and he goes, I'll never forget this. This kid goes, what do you think you're doing? I said, well, we're loading these horses up. And he said, no, it's same rig, but he looks at me and says, you're not the guy that left them here. And
Oh my.
I said, well, I assure you they're mine. And then John stepped around the truck and said, yeah, I started driving. Remember me? And he said, yeah, I remember you. So
Okay.
he said, I called the sheriff, and they said, well, somebody will probably be back after him. And sure enough, there we were. And
Oh
so,
my gosh.
so then now it's funny, of course, all
Yeah.
these years later.
Yeah.
At the time, I was pretty nervous and excited about it. But just one of those funny things
Yeah.
that now it's funny that happens on the rodeo trail that people wouldn't believe if they didn't live through it.
Well, that's exactly right. And our listeners love the travel stories. That's probably one of the most often asked questions. So they're going to appreciate this story. I have never heard a story quite like that, Dale. That's so when you travel, this will kind of tie into the listeners. When you travel, how often do you stop, let them off, let them leg up? How can you do it in a safe place? What typically were your habits?
Well, we would stop every 4 or 5 hours, usually, unless, bad weather or something where, you didn't want to get them out in it. But we would usually try to stop every 4 or 5 hours, walk around a little bit, give them, offer them a drink of water, let them go to the bathroom. Trailers have changed a lot too. Now that most of these trailers that they're traveling in are so big, a horse, I always hauled geldings. And so, those boy horses like to stretch out a little when they go to the bathroom. And so now these trailers are so big, and people putting shavings in their trailers, bedding and stuff.
Okay.
A lot of them will go to the bathroom in the trailer. Back then, the trailers were smaller, most of them, and there wasn't as much room for the horses. And so we tried to get them out often enough that, about like a person, you every few hours you need to go to the bathroom and stretch your legs a little, and so we tried to give them a little break.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you for that. And speaking of horses, so we're going to go back to the dogging, and we're going to be talking about the dogging horse and the hazing horses here. What is the build and temperament that you're looking for in these horses? So a dogging horse, steer wrestling horse that the steer wrestler is going to jump off from and the hazer is going to ride beside. Build and temperament, Dale.
Well, the kind of prototype for a steer wrestling horse is not too tall, but big enough and strong enough to carry enough weight and weight hanging on their side. Some of the steer wrestlers are large size men, and so you need a horse that can carry that weight when you hang off the side. It doesn't pull them off stride and so on. And the steer wrestling's a little unique compared to like a roping horse. Some of the same characteristics help with a good mind, and it will score what we call score, where they'll stand in the box flat-footed and go when you want to go, not when they want to go. Or they're watching the cattle, but the barrier's different length, different places. You might need to give the steer a longer head start or shorter head start. So you need to be able to control them and go when you want to go. But roping, I think for a cow-bred horse comes a little more natural, because people that haven't been around horses, probably haven't experienced, like if you see a cutting horse and they're pinning their ears and getting down and following a calf or a cow's every move and stuff, they train them, but there's some natural instinct there. A horse that's what we call cowy, you can take and just naturally fall in behind a calf or a steer or a cow or whatever it might be, and they'll kind of pin their ears and go to them. It's a natural instinct, but that natural instinct is to rate that cow. And so like a rope horse, they'll run a tie down horse or a breakaway horse will run up behind them, but then they'll kind of naturally rate off and track that calf. And then when you rope, you teach them to stop and work the rope and stuff. But where a steer wrestling horse, you kind of got a combination of, you want them to have enough cow where they're paying attention and going to the steer. Then they got to have a little of that racehorse runaway mentality, that they're not going to rate off and stay alongside of them or behind them, that they'll blow on by and run by. And I think it becomes a game to them. It's a race, just like a a horse race. They're in competition with that steer. I think a little bit in their mind, it's a race. They're trying to pass them and win the race. And that's my thought anyway. I don't know. A horse philosopher probably will tell me I'm crazy, but I think it's a bit of a game to them. But to have a good one that will stay good for a long time, they got to be pretty gritty and tough. If they don't have that real want to, and it's not fun to them, they don't really want to race that steer, after a while, they'll kind of give it up and start loafing, and then you can't win on them. And that'll cost you. So it takes a pretty gritty, tough horse that wants to do it. And in the steer wrestling, at some point you're turning them loose and getting off, and they have to work on their own. They're not a tie down horse. The rope is always connected to the horse or to the saddle, and there's always a connection there. Where the steer wrestling and team roping, you're roping the steer and dallying to your saddle and all those things. Where the steer wrestling, at some point you're turning them completely loose and asking them to work completely on their own, free of any tethers.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit unique.
And it is unique. And I've noticed, through watching, after the run, the cowboy wants that horse to the end after he gets off. He wants that horse all the way to the other end of the arena, and really wants to pick him up down there. Is that true?
Absolutely. And, there's a few exceptions. I've seen some horses that will run back up the arena and they'll go ahead and catch them up there, but that's very, very rare. You always want to catch them at the other end so that they know that's their place. That's their place to go. Okay. And because, unless something really goes wrong, or it's an average, steer wrestling, multiple go rounds that you might run one back down the fence or something to try to stay in the average, 99% of the time it's one run straight down through there to the back end. And so I always want them to go to that back end, and that's their place where you pick them up. Even if you've got multiple people riding the same horse and you're going to go right back up the arena and somebody else is going to get on them and run a steer, you want to catch them at the other end where they know that's the finish line.
Okay, and absolutely. And one of the things you talked about was if it's not fun for the horse anymore, he's going to loaf a bit. Have you had horses go sour? They just said, no, this is enough of this.
Well, yeah, I've seen horses. I had some horses that I had, and lots of steer wrestling horses that I know of, they may have roped a little on them first.
Okay.
Maybe they're team roping on them or something. And I've had guys tell me, man, this horse needs to be a steer wrestling horse. I'm heading steers on him, and he scores good, and he's good in the box, and he can really run, but I'm pulling him up the whole time when I'm trying to rope. He doesn't have much rate, and he wants to run by. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can find a good steer wrestling horse that way, that it's already got some of the training in, the box training and stuff, that's already part way along. And sometimes they'll just take to it, and they do really want to run by, and that's fun to them, and they'll make a good steer wrestling horse. But I have seen where those guys, they feel like they're running off with them, and they're constantly holding them up to try to rope. Okay. But then when you really ask them to really run by, some of them will decide, you know what, that's not really what I want, and they'll kind of give it up. Okay. And then you can go back to roping on them, or you can make a hazing horse on them, because you're still riding the horse hazing. You're still in control, and you can kick up there and control the horse and guide the horse, as opposed to steer wrestling where you're just turning loose of the bridle reins and they've got to want to do it on their own.
Okay, perfect. There were two other questions that came in, and you just touched on them. One is, are the horses used for any other event during the same rodeo performance or weekend, let's say? You talk about roping, team roping, bulldogging. Have you seen that? And have you seen it at the highest levels, I guess the question would be.
Well, yes, I've seen it. Okay. I think it's less prominent now. I think in my early days, and certainly before me, there was was more people. My mother and father-in-law had a horse that she ran barrels on, and my mother-in-law did, and my father-in-law steer wrestled on back in their day. There was other examples of that. Sometimes somebody would. There were certainly some tie-down horses that they would heel steers on or rope steers on. The horses kind of knew the difference in the events. One kind of unique thing that happened with me and horses that we've had is, in the mid 90s probably, I had a hazing horse that was getting a little age on him and starting to slow down a step, and so I was kind of looking for a new hazing horse. And Clarence LeBlanc, that was one of my early traveling partners and stuff, he wasn't traveling much. He was staying pretty close to home, and he had a horse that they had run barrels on. His aunt had run barrels on a little bit when he was young, a young colt, but he evidently wasn't making it as a barrel horse, and so Clarence took him and started hazing steers on him, and he was making a good hazing horse. And so I talked to Clarence about him, and he said, I could take him and try him. And so I picked him up and took him and tried him and bought the horse. And he was a really good hazing horse. I mean, he's one of the best ones I've had, and he could really run. And so my wife had a different barrel horse at the time. So one day I'm just here at home out in the arena, just exercising horses. We weren't practicing or anything. I'm just riding some horses and exercising them. And the barrels were set up in the arena. And so I'm out there all by myself. And so I'm on this horse that I'm hazing on. And so I just breezed him through the barrel pattern. And man, he just ate the barrels up and just acted like he knew all about that. And we know the lady that rode him when he was young. And so I got up to the barn and I jokingly told Kathy, my wife, I said, "You're riding the wrong horse, because my horse can fly and he can outrun your horse." And I'm kind of joking, but anyway, she said, "Yeah, right. She wouldn't have sold that horse if he was any good." I said, "Well, I don't know, but I ran him through the barrels out there and he knows what's going on." And so she started riding him some and taking him some jackpots and stuff. And it turned out she qualified for the IFR on him a few times, and he made a really good barrel horse. Well, for the first couple of years, she was running barrels on him, and he was a really tough horse and kind of mean and kind of ornery. I mean, he had kind of a, not terrible disposition, but he's just one of those kind of, I always had a little edge to him, and the more you used him, kind of the better he was. Like he needed a job. He needed to do something. Just standing around and eating and just getting fat and sassy, he would be a handful. So anyway, we were hazing steers and running barrels on him. One year at the IFR, and it was 5 go-rounds back then, she rode him in the barrel racing, and I hazed. I think I had 6 or 7 guys riding one of my horses, a couple of guys riding another horse, and I hazed for a couple more guys that had their own horses. I hazed probably 12 steers a night on him, and then she would run barrels on him. And really, it was just right, because he was ready to go by the time they got to the barrel racing, and so he was pretty unique that way. But I mean, we hazed a lot of steers on him, and she would run barrels on him, and it was funny. So we're constantly changing saddles, right? At these rodeos, are slack after the rodeo, so I've got a roping saddle on him to haze out of, and then I'd have to put the barrel saddle on him, and then she'd run barrels, and then back to the hazing saddle, and so finally I got tired of all that saddling and unsaddling, and so she's much smaller than me. And so I said, I let her stirrups all the way out to see if I could just haze in that barrel saddle, because sometimes she might be in the slack, and so I'm hazing a steer, and then boom, the barrel racing's next. And so I started just hazing out of her barrel saddle, and people would make fun of me, but I didn't care. And so whoever hazed for me would have to get on there and ride that barrel saddle, and Kathy's not much over 100 pounds and about 5.5 feet tall, and I'm 6'2" and 225 or 30 pounds. I'm twice her size, but I'd be packed in that little barrel saddle and hazing steers. So that would be a good joke for people to make fun of me. But anyway,
wow, I know those the barrel racing saddles are a lot smaller just in general. I'll bet you were packed in there. Have you ever, can a dog and horse switch to become a hazing horse and vice versa? Have you seen that much?
Absolutely. So some of the steer wrestling horses I hazed on them first to get them started. It's a good learning experience. I've even had some that you could switch back and forth after you'd done it. 1 year at Duval's steer wrestling jackpot. Every spring, Duval's in Chakotah, Oklahoma have a big steer wrestling jackpot. It used to be at Roy Duval's house. Now it's at the Roundup Club, and Sam and Spud Duval and Riley Duval put it on. But when Roy and Bill had the jackpot out at Roy's house, it was a big event. I mean, they'd get hundreds of steer wrestlers, and one of the premier steer wrestling jackpots that ever has been, and it's still going on. So 1 year there, on Friday they have a 4 for 500, a big event, and then on Saturday they have a 19 and under and a 40 and over, and then on Sunday they have an open jackpot, and so Oakberry was going to some rodeos with me. We were traveling together some, and I was actually using Oates' hazing horse, and so mine was hurt, and so I was using his, and he wanted to give his a day off. So the one, actually both steer wrestling horses I had hazed on them before, and so on Saturday for the 40 and over, I rode one and he rode the other, and we just switched sides, and he hazed on the one that he was bulldogging on for me, and vice versa, and people looked at us like we were crazy. We just, one time he ran a steer and there was only one or two guys, and I was up, and we just got on the other horse and switched sides and rode in there, and
wow.
and he won the jackpot on
He
won the 40 and over that day and stuff, and so on Friday the Ronnie Fields won the 4 for 500 on the one bulldogging horse. And then the next day, Oak won the 40 and over on the other horse with me hazing on the one Ronnie rode. And anyway, it's just kind of, they were a couple of horses that, they were fine on either side and worked just as well either side. And you could control them enough to haze a steer, if you needed to raid off. And some bulldogging horses just run off, and you can't, it's hard to haze on them because they won't stay alongside the steer. They'll just blow by. Where those two, you could still kind of control them a little bit. So it happens sometimes, but it's a good way to get them started.
Okay. Wow. I didn't know all that. That's excellent. Difficulties, another listener questions, difficulty taking horses across state lines, into fairgrounds or out of the country. I know you traveled up to Canada. Challenges there?
Yeah, and as my career went on, it kind of got more prevalent where they checked for papers more, Coggins and health papers and things like that. And each state has its own rules and regulations on that. So most of them, as long as you keep a current health paper within 30 days and a current Coggins within, some states are 6 months and some are 12 months. So you kind of got to be aware of that, and if you keep the papers with you, usually you'll get along pretty good. I never forget one time I was in Missouri, over there in southeast Missouri, and I was driving north on Interstate 55, and I'm going up through there, and I may have been driving a little bit faster than the speed limit trying to get somewhere, and I see the lights come on behind me, and I'm thinking, oh no, I'm getting a ticket, and I pull over, and I thought it was a highway patrol, and the guy came up there, and he was a livestock inspector. He had a car like a highway patrol and a uniform that looked somewhat like a highway patrol, and he said, I need to see the Coggins and health paper for these horses, and my heart quit beating fast, and I was so relieved I had my papers in order, and I was more than happy to show show him my papers because I didn't get a speeding ticket. He didn't even mention how fast I was going. So
that's excellent. Now,
it turned out good.
Did he have to crawl in and inspect the horses to verify that those horses matched up with your papers?
He could see through the like the head door on the trailer and stuff. He just went back there and verified, this horse fits this description, and he didn't make us get him out of the trailer or anything. He could see enough of them that the color matched and so on and so forth. And
So let's shift to steers. Here's another listener question. What's the breed, size, build that you're looking for as a steer wrestler?
Well, so and still the predominant breed is Mexican Corriente cattle. I think that's certainly the preferred choice. Now they've gotten a little harder to come by than what they used to be, and so there's also an American Corriente, which is the same sort of breed, but they raise them in the U.S. They're a little different, but and then native cattle, longhorns and stuff have become more widely used because of the Corrientes from Mexico have gotten very expensive and not as easy to come by. And some states and Canada, it's really hard to get Corrientes into just the testing that they require and stuff. So a lot of those states and certainly in Canada, they pretty much run longhorn cattle, and so that's changed a little bit. The steers, not in every case. I think they're smaller as a general rule. They're smaller now than like when I started to rodeo. I think again the cattle coming out of Mexico were more plentiful and easy to get, and they were a little older steers, even though they were fresh and new to rodeo. I've never been off down there in Mexico, but I've talked to people that go down there and that buy cattle and deal in Corriente cattle, and they said if you go off down in there deep into Mexico, back years ago, I don't know if it's still this way. There's the steers are sort of open range down there, and some of these families that are living in very poor conditions, they'll catch some if they can, and they'll have a little pen for them. I've even heard stories that they might have one tied up to the porch on the front of their house, and then these buyers will come around and buy them and load them up and get the papers, and they put them in quarantine and stuff, and then cross them into the U.S. And so, but they used to be bigger. And so a couple things happened. One, they kind of took those older steers out of the population, and brought them into the U.S. and used them in rodeo and ropings and stuff. And then also, I think they've imported some U.S. cattle down there into Mexico, and some have went the other way. And so the really purebred Corrientes that we used to get are not as plentiful. Now they might have a little more Bramer in them, or other U.S. influence, because it made the cattle beefier and more for that line of it made more beef cattle down there, but it also kind of polluted, if you will, the Corriente market. So that's changed a little bit, but the steers, we used to run some steers that weigh, sometimes 600 or 700 pounds when I first started, and now that's really rare. A lot of the steers now, 400 to 450. A 500-pound steer now is pretty big. At most rodeos, they're not going to be heavier than that. There's some exceptions. Some keep them around longer or feed better, and they've got bigger steers. But most of them now are probably 4 to 450, 500 on the top end, and where it used to be, we ran some smaller ones sometimes back then too, but they were, as a general rule, bigger steers and bigger frame. And I can remember I used to get some steers for some stock contractors in the spring and precondition them for them, get them ready to go and run them and throw them down, and get them ready to go to the rodeo. And there were some of those steers, they would be fresh from Mexico. but they were already 4 and 5 years old, and they just, their breed and the conditions down there, they just hadn't got too big to run yet. They'd have big horns, their horns would be bigger than a lot of them are now because, I was looking the other day, the picture that I had sent you off the cover of Old Rodeo News, when we talked last time, that steer's not real big. He's not real tall, but you can see his horns are, about as long as my arm, nearly on each side of his head. They were they were framier and bigger horns back then. Now a lot of them are smaller frame and smaller horns, just because their age. They're crossing them earlier, and they're younger cattle.
Okay, and the size of the horns, the length of the horns, more challenges, less challenges, doesn't really matter.
Well, I like the bigger horn cattle. I mean, you have more leverage, and especially when the steers themselves were bigger, you needed more leverage, right? Because they were bigger, stronger animals. But and there's less chance of getting kind of pulled by a horn. If the steer lets off a little, there's more horn to catch, and less chance that you slip a horn. When you're steer wrestling, you turn them back and get them by the nose to wrestle them to the ground. If they got little short horns, it's more of a chance of them slipping a horn by you and getting away. So I like the bigger horn ones, but not so big they can't fit through the chute, kind of that happy medium where they
turn their head to get through. Yeah.
Well, and the Corianis have a tendency to turn up more, not right out of their head, but grow some out and then turn up, where Longhorns, a lot of them will be a lot straighter. They'll just grow straighter out of their head and straight out. So if they get too big, it's hard for them to get through the chute, because they're not turning up like a Coriani. So you might have to tip them back more, and so they'll fit through the chute.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. This next set of questions is about the hazer. Mm-hmm. Jackie sent in a question, and she wanted to know, can a hazer qualify for a championship? Just being a hazer.
So there's no competition for the hazer. So there's not any awards given or a champion crowned as a hazer, but you can certainly do both. I mean, I hazed lots and lots of steers, and as well as won championships as a steer wrestler. But there's not any exact competition or prizes or awards for the hazer. Like the IPRA has a hazing horse of the year is a voted on thing by the members, and so the horse can win, but the guy riding the horse doesn't. It's one of those jobs. Jokingly, we used to say, it's nobody notices you until you make a mistake, right? I mean, you can haze 100 of them in a row and get the job done, and nobody even notices who's over there. And then the first time you screw up, it's like, oh, did you see that guy? But yeah, it's there's not any real competition for them. If they own the horse, they got an opportunity to make money by hazing for guys that win. So there's incentive there to do a good job, besides just doing the right thing and wanting to give everybody the best opportunity that you can. Mm-hmm. The more they win on your horse or that you haze for them, the more money you make. So there's certainly a financial incentive.
So if I'm, let me set up a scenario. We're talking about mount money. I understand that if I'm getting on a dogging horse and I win money, I'm going to pay money in what's called mount money to the owner of that horse. What if I've got my own dogging horse and I need you to haze for me on your horse? Is there any mount money if I win? Is there any mount money is there a tradition, I guess is the question?
Yeah, it's customary. A lot of times you'll hear they pay 25% of what they win. That's really, they're paying an eighth for the steer wrestling horse and an eighth to the hazing horse. So if you have your own horse and you ask me to haze for you on my horse, I'm gonna haze for you, and if you win something, I'm gonna get an eighth of that as opposed to a fourth. Okay. But if you ask to ride my steer wrestling horse and I have a hazing horse, I'm just going to automatically haze for you in most cases. So
Okay.
I'm going
Yeah.
to get the eighth for each, which is going to total the fourth.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really divided up an eighth each side, and
I
so
see.
so
I
yeah,
see.
you can make money even if you're just hazing for somebody and
Okay.
they're riding their own horse.
Okay. Perfect. Perfect. And then the final question around the hazer: can a steer wrestler pick whoever they want as a partner, a hazer, anytime, anytime? For example, the IFR. And then the kind of sub question to this: does the hazer need to be entered?
So you can choose anyone to haze for you. Now, as I kind of mentioned earlier, if you ask to ride my steer wrestling horse and I have a hazing horse, it's a
Mm-hmm.
package deal. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
haze for you, and
Mm-hmm.
unless I choose not to or say, hey, why don't you get somebody else? But that's kind of just customary that if I have a team of horses and you ride my steer wrestling horse, I'm gonna haze also. But yeah, you can ask anybody there, and they don't have to be entered in the steer wrestling.
Okay.
I've had either guys that used to steer wrestle that don't anymore haze for me, and
Mm-hmm.
I've had some tie down ropers that travel with me, or that I know are good cowboys and can ride a horse good that haze for me, and they're not entered in the steer wrestling,
Okay.
but they're they know how to haze.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Thank you for that. Let's go to the barrier. You spoke about the barrier earlier, how the horse scores and all that sort of thing. How is the barrier length determined? That's one question came in. Is the barrier always the same length is the other question.
Yeah, so it varies from rodeo to rodeo, and so there's rules in the rule book that give the judge the guidelines to set it up by, and primarily it's the how deep the box is, the box that you back into. So you'll take the length of that box or how deep it is, and subtract from there to establish the length of the barrier.
Okay. Okay.
And then there's some variance in there, it gives them some flexibility. If the arena is real short, or the condition of the steers, they either run real hard or they're slow, or the judge has some discretion to make it a little longer or a little shorter to kind of take that variable into account. But primarily it's decided by the length of the box.
Okay.
And so and then from there, how much you need to see to get out of the barrier certainly depends on the length of the barrier, but then also you got to factor in, is the steers in general, or the particular steer that you have, if he has a track record, if he's been run before, if you can find out, is he slow or fast? Because a slow one, you need to give a little more head start to keep from breaking the barrier, and a faster one, you can shave it down a little bit and go a little quicker, to try to catch up. So there's several variables in there, but the length is, and that changes every rodeo. Some stock contractors have a lot of their rodeos are the same setup, because really, especially like in the Midwest, we have a lot of rodeos in Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, and up through there that are fair rodeos, like at county fairs, and they might just be a portable arena in front of a grandstand. And so that stock contractor is kind of taking the same arena from rodeo to rodeo and setting it up, tearing it down. So if his box is 15 feet deep, if it's 10 by 15, he's got that same setup at several rodeos, where it's not just in Oklahoma, in this part of the country, but certain parts of the country have a lot more permanent arenas that are up year round, and they don't set them up just for the rodeo. And so then you might have a 15-foot box or a 14, and you might have a 20-foot box. And so there's lots of differences there. And so you adjust the barrier according to the how deep the box is, and a little bit the size of the arena and the cattle that you're going to run.
Okay. Okay. Did you ever get on a streak of broken barriers yourself, Dale?
Well, sometimes I don't know if I would remember a real streak, but sometimes and sometimes when you're either riding a different horse or you're riding different horses, if you're not hauling your own in every rodeo you go to, you got to pick a different one, or might not ride the same horse consistently. That one of the things that I liked about either traveling with the same person and riding the same horse all the time, or hauling my own and riding the same one, you kind of get a much better feel for it. I think I was pretty good at scoring and figuring out the start. You're going to break the barrier once in a while. Either something's going to happen, you misjudge and the steer doesn't run quite as hard as you think, or something like that. And then sometimes, like the competition is so tough, like you're backing in there and 4 flat is winning the last hole. Well, you can't miss the barrier at all and have a chance to win. So you might take a little more of a chance and really try to, what we call, knock the barrier out of there, really nail the start. And because there's no room for error, no margin for error, and you got to just max out everything and to have a chance to win. So then you'll take a little more of a chance. But I wasn't, I certainly broke some barriers, but I think I went to the IFR 10 times before I ever broke the barrier at the IFR.
Really?
Really? I mean, just and not that it was a difficult start, but I think, as generally I was pretty good at scoring and reading the barrier and the cattle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And for our listeners, just give a typical length of a barrier, which means the head start for the steer. What is it in feet typically?
Well, and so one of the formulas I had was I would, like, the neck rope, when I get there before the rodeo and I find out what I've got drawn, or I go down and look at the steers or the setup. So if where the barrier pins, if I take the neck rope and put that pin in and run the neck rope around the front of it, and then pull it actually back to the corner that I'm going to back into. So it'll loop around there and pull back toward the corner. And so then I would pull it back there, and where the neck rope reached, I would scratch a line on the ground with my foot.
Oh, wow.
And so then I would I'd stand in the back of the corner of the box where my horse would be, and I'd take 2 normal steps, which would give me about where my horse's chest is going to be. And so then I'd draw another line there. And then I would step that distance between the horse's chest and where the neck rope comes back to. And this isn't any exact science, but if it was 4 feet, if it was 1 step and another foot, then it was probably going to be just right behind that steer. They just had to make forward motion. Now you'd have to look at the chute itself and see are the gates real flat, because if they're real flat, you're going to have to see a little bit more. If they're V'd a lot, where that steer can get way up in the front of it, then you can probably go a little quicker, because where the barrier pins will be where the gate hinges, not where at the front of the gate, right? So that's a little bit of a variable. But and then if it's less than that 4 feet, if you got to adjust from there and give them a little more of a head start. And so anyway, it's kind of probably doesn't make sense to somebody that hasn't really lived that and done that. But that was one thing that I did to try to get an idea. And then it's also an advantage to be further down in the competition. If you're first out,
I see,
then you got to figure all that out for yourself. If you're 4th or 5th, or if you get a run after the rodeo in the slack, it's a big advantage to be able to watch the steers and see how hard they run and kind of that's why you'll see at a rodeo all those guys gathered up in the back of the box and around the box that are really watching and studying the start to see what those other guys are doing, and were they right on the barrier, a little late, a little early, and adjust accordingly. And the more steers that are run, the more guys will kind of figure it out and get it nailed down. But that was a formula that I used to try to get a rough idea of what I thought the start was going to be.
Okay. And then the final question, which kind of pulls it all together. You and the hazer are backed in the box on your horses. The steer is loaded. what do the cowboys, both the hazer and the dogger, of course, and the horses watch to know when it's time to go?
So and the steer wrestling, obviously, in the tie down roping or breakaway roping, you're on your own. There's only one person on a horse competing, and so
Right.
you don't have that that dynamic of an extra horse and rider. Team roping, you have two, so you got to pay attention there. But so in the steer wrestling, I mean, you and that's why you want to have both a hazing horse, a steer wrestling horse that are calm enough to stand in the corner and get everything set. It's the general rule. It's the hazer's responsibility, if he's not ready or doesn't feel like his horse is set, to let the steer wrestler know that he's not ready. So if he backs in there, usually while they're pinning the barrier, the hazer will go ahead and turn around and get in the corner. Then the steer wrestler, when they pin the barrier, will turn around and back in the corner. So if the hazer should be set before the steer wrestler, and then it's his responsibility, if he feels like his horse is going to move or he's not sitting comfortable or doesn't feel right, you'll say, hold up.
Okay.
Or, get the steer wrestler to, because they're the ones that are going to nod and signal for the run to begin. So the hazer doesn't control that. So then he'll get his horse set and say, okay, to let you know he's ready. And then when everybody's ready, the steer wrestler will nod to signal to the gate man to release the steer. But so you got to get all that ready, and hopefully everybody's ready at the same time. But that's why you need horses. It's a big advantage to have horses on both sides that will stand there and focus on the steer and look forward, where, as soon as, because the steer is another variable, right? He might be fighting the chute or turning around or turning his head, or, you want him kind of standing up in the front, looking forward where they'll break clean. You don't want them with their head turned around, looking back at you and things like that. So you also got, somebody over there getting the steer's head straight. And so you want the horses to be able to stand there. So when that steer gets right, because you haven't trained the steer, right? You've trained the horses, and hopefully you got them doing what they're supposed to do. But if you can get them ready so that when the steer gets ready, you can nod and everybody's ready to go.
Okay, perfect. And one of my favorite sayings that I've heard over the years is, to make a perfect steer wrestling run, 5 minds have to come together. The horses, 2 horses, 2 cowboys, and a steer.
Yeah. And then you can, if you want to throw another wrinkle in, you can even sprinkle the gate man in there, and the guy getting the steer's head and the pushing the steer, and and all those things. But yeah, the horses and the guys riding them and the steer have to kind of get synced up and get on the same page in the playbook.
And these horses are ready to run. They're keyed up typically when they get backed in the box. And I've seen them rear up and move out and want to go before, because they've sat too long. So you got to kind of watch that too.
Well, yeah. And so again, an advantage if you've got one that will stand there flat-footed and be ready to go, but not do those things. But yeah, they're high-strung animals, and I think a lot of that anticipation and want to is because they do understand the game. I mean, they figure it out. Like I said earlier, it's like a horse race. They want to win. Yeah. They know that pretty soon that steer is going to take off, and the goal in the game is to pass that steer. And so they want to be ready, and they're on the muscle ready to go, so that when you what we say, drop the clutch, turn the bridle reins loose, they're ready to go. And of course, primarily quarter horses are used, and fastest horse there is from for a short distance, and they can really accelerate out of there and get that steer caught.
You bet. Perfect. Well, I thank you for all your questions, and I want to thank all of our listeners. They listened to your episode, and they sent me questions, so it's great. In some cases, we have listeners that don't know a ton about rodeo. So we're hoping to educate as we do this. So thank you for those great explanations, Dale, and to our listeners, thank you for sending in the questions, and keep them coming. Let's move a little bit, Dale. Let's transition. You're an 11-time steer wrestling champion. You're a rodeo cowboy, and you decide to get involved in management leadership of the International Professional Rodeo Association. If my records are correct, you started out on the board of directors as the steer wrestling director and served some time there. Could you talk a little bit about the board of directors and how you came into that role? Have you had an interest in transitioning into management?
Well, when I first got on the board as a steer wrestling director, I was probably, gosh, 23 or 4 years old, not very old, and a guy named Leon McCoy was the current steer wrestling director, and he was a older guy that had been steer wrestling for a long time and been around rodeo a long time, really, very knowledgeable, and so he wasn't going to be traveling much and stuff, and he wanted to slow down, and so he decided it was probably a good time for him to step down as steer wrestling director, just because he didn't have the time to dedicate to it and wasn't going to be traveling much, and so he resigned his position, and so I don't remember who it was, but somebody that was on the board approached me about, hey, Leon's resigning from the board, and so there wasn't an election scheduled, and so because they're 2-year terms for the directors on the board, and so he was somewhere in during his term, and so they asked me if I would be interested in fulfilling his position. The board would appoint somebody to fill the rest of his term, and then it would go back on the normal election cycle every 2 years. So at that point, I guess I was flattered that they would ask me. But so probably partly out of naivety, I said sure, I would be interested, and I was I guess a little bit flattered that they would ask me, and I always would want to be somebody that was trying to give back to something that I liked or cared about, and so I thought that was an opportunity to do that and get involved that way. So I said, yeah, I would be interested in that. And so the board took that action and somebody nominated me to fulfill that position, and the board approved it. And so there I went. And so at that age, I'm sure I thought I knew a lot more than I did and all of that. But I got involved, and so I have never regretted it, because it gives you, I've seen over the years lots of people come and go on the board, but it's good for almost everybody that I've seen do it. Some it overwhelms them, and it becomes kind of a hindrance, because they get to the rodeo and somebody wants to talk to them about the business side or a decision that's made, or different things that takes them a little bit away from the competition part of it. But most people, when they get on there, it gives you a new perspective. You see kind of some sides of rodeo that you're probably not familiar with, because most of us either are a competitor, or like they're stock contractors that are on the board. That's all they know is putting on rodeos, and then you have some committee people that represent the rodeo committees on the board, and the different pieces of the puzzle that all they kind of know what they do, but they may not know what the other sides of rodeo and what everybody deals with. So hopefully everybody comes together for the greater good and makes decisions that's best for the rising tide raises all ships, right? And so they come together and make decisions that everybody will benefit from as a whole, and the whole organization will benefit from. But it does open your eyes and give you a new perspective and you hear those contractors or those committees share their experiences and what they deal with, and it's very enlightening and those kinds of things. Now, as I said, it's sometimes a little bit of a headache, because you have to list the problems, and there's some responsibility there, because you represent not only like as an event director, the people in your event and trying to make it better for them, but also make good decisions, for the greater good, and that everybody will benefit from.
Yeah. So how did that, though? How many years were you a steer wrestling director for the IPRA?
Oh, I think the first time for 3 or 4 years. I think
Okay.
I fulfilled his term, so that had about a year left on it, and then served maybe two more terms, so probably about five,
Okay.
and then stepped away for a little bit, and then got back. That would have been kind of mid '80s still when I
Mm-hmm.
first got on there,
Mm-hmm.
and then stepped away in the late '80s, and then in the early '90s I ran for steer wrestling director again, and got elected, and served another term or two, and then ran for vice president, and eventually for president.
Okay, so for our listeners, so you had a board of directors, you had a president, a vice president, but there wasn't a general manager like there is today. Is that correct?
Well, that role and position has kind of changed a little bit over the years. So at one time there wasn't anybody like that. I mean, there was an office staff and office manager,
Mm-hmm.
and then along the way, and when I first got on the board, there was I think the position then was called executive director, which is somebody very similar to what I do now. It was just a different name on the position that
Okay.
oversaw the day-to-day business and stuff. And we have a full-time office staff that somebody has to be in charge of also. And and so then in that position, the name actually changed in 2007 when I took that position, just because I not to blow my own horn, but I probably could have kept it executive director, probably
Mm-hmm.
could have been CEO or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I personally thought general manager was a pretty good term because it was managing all these pieces and trying to manage the whole thing, and almost like a GM in a sports franchise that you have a coach or the different things and the different pieces, but the general manager kind of oversees all of that and makes sure that those other pieces have what they need, or you try to get them what they need. So that's when the name of it changed to general manager.
Okay, okay, perfect. And for our listeners, I want to back up just a little bit. We're going to get more into some of the duties and things that you're involved in, but we want to talk about the International Professional Rodeo, headquartered in Oklahoma City in the Stockyard District of Oklahoma City. Founded in 1957, known then as the Interstate Rodeo Association. And then
Mm-hmm.
over time, that changed, Dale, to the International Rodeo Association. And then it sounds like in 1983, from my research, the word professional was added. And so it became the IPRA, the International Professional Rodeo Association. And just a little bit of information that I was able to glean, you sanction about 400 rodeos a year across the United States?
Yeah, and we need we need to update it. It's
Yeah.
grown since then.
Okay.
We this year, 2023, last I looked. Now this is with some of the co-sanction agreements that we
Mm-hmm.
have and
Mm-hmm.
stuff too. So we co-sanction with some state and regional associations, and so not all of them are IPRA, what we call first sanction rodeos, but we'll have over 600 rodeos
Oh,
in
wow.
2023 that we're involved with.
Okay,
So
and
yeah.
there that includes your co-sanction IPRA first.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
the
yeah.
600?
That are IPRA first, and
Mm-hmm.
some of those are IPRA second. So in the
Okay.
northeast part of the U.S., we have a co-sanction agreement with the APRA, American
Mm-hmm.
Pro Rodeo Association,
Mm-hmm.
that we've had that agreement for a long time and have worked with them for a number of years, decades now, and so some of those rodeos might be APRA first and IPRA second,
Okay.
but all in probably about 400 of those 600 are IPRA first, and then a couple hundred would be another association first. But our members still go to them, and the points count and all those things. And so there's a lot of rodeos under the umbrella.
Yeah. And for our listeners, co-sanction means I can ride with both an IPRA card and an APRA card. in a co-sanctioned rodeo, as Dale was just describing, or I can ride just with an APRA card or just with an IPRA card. But if I do well at that rodeo and I'm holding both cards, my points count for the IPRA standings and they count for the APRA standings. And when we think of the history of rodeo, Dale, that's a fairly new invention. Back in the day, I'm hearing some stories that they would war against, one association might war with another association. Do you remember some of those days?
Well, the biggest example of that I remember in my time was when I started to compete and moved to Oklahoma to hit the rodeo trail. The PRCA still had a rule in place, and the PRCA doesn't co-sanction like we do with these state and regional associations. They do have a sort of a co-sanction with the WPRA that sanctions barrel racing and breakaway roping, and they do some stuff with the CPRA in Western Canada, but with Calgary and some of those big rodeos out there. But the PRCA used to have a rule that if you had a PRCA card, you couldn't be a member of or compete at other rodeos that weren't sanctioned by the PRCA. And then the IPRA had a rule that said you can't compete at any rodeos that won't allow our members to be members. So they would literally have people turn people in. If somebody had a PRCA card and slipped off, so to speak, and went to an IPRA rodeo and somebody turned them in, they would get fined and other penalties, and vice versa. There were people that had IPRA cards that would get turned in, and if they would see the results or whatever and prove that they went to a PRCA rodeo, they would lose their points and stuff. I mean, it was considered a very serious offense, and there were people that lost their points in the standings. May have cost them a trip to the IFR if they got caught going to a PRCA rodeo. And so, people that rodeo now, the younger people that are rodeoing now, most of them don't know that ever existed. Right. And they're just shocked when you say, when I was still competing, I said something driving down the road one day I was the oldest one in the truck, and I said something I said, well, back before they opened it up and you could go anywhere, and they go, what do you mean? And I explained to them, and they were like, really? I mean, they couldn't believe that that it used to be that way. But so that's behind us now, and so since then, co-sanctions have become a lot more prevalent, and the contestants have gotten used to it, and a lot of them, they want the points to count, multiple places and give them a chance to make more finals and win awards in multiple organizations. So
absolutely. And how many members? What's your membership right now? What's your membership base, Dale?
I think we'll be about 3,000 this year.
Great.
And it was 2,900 and some the last time I looked.
Really? Okay, great. And one of the places, we have seen the IPRA really expand into Canada. Wasn't that long ago. There might be 10, 12 rodeos up there, and right now I'm reading that you sanction about 40 rodeos up there. IPRA Canada sanctions those rodeos up there now.
Yeah, we started over the years. There's occasionally been a rodeo in Canada. A long time ago, there was a few producers that would go up there and do some at Toronto and places like that. I can remember going to Thunder Bay, Ontario, right up above the point of Minnesota, years ago, back in the 80s and stuff. But then it pretty much was non-existent for a while, and then somewhere along in the 1990s, a lot of it started with St. Tite that I know you visited in September. That rodeo was really growing, both in prize money and attendance, and that festival. It was really, I mean, it had been a big thing for a long time, but they started in the 60s, but they wanted to sort of be part of something bigger and sanction with the IPRA. So it started as a co-sanction, and that was a lot of our foot in the door in Eastern Canada, and so a lot of our members started going up there. So then some of the other rodeos became interested in in being part of the IPRA and the producers that were putting them on, and so Sylvan Bourgeois with Wild Time Productions, that's the general manager of the rodeo at St. Tite also. Him and BJ Prince, that's Rawhide Rodeo in Ontario, they were the two of the main players that I met with and talked to and tried to. There was a lot of interest there to be part of the IPRA and a chance for us to really expand our footprint up there. And so working with those guys, and they started bringing their rodeos to sanction with the IPRA. We started to sell a Canadian membership for the contestants that didn't want to cross the border and try to qualify for the IFR. They could buy a Canadian card, which is the same basic membership. It just doesn't come with the insurance because they have national health care in Canada, so they didn't need the accident insurance the same way that our U.S. members did, or people, on this side of the border. And so it went from there, and then we created a Canadian finals for all of those rodeos. It's similar to a region finals for Canada. All the rodeos in Canada count toward it, and so those rodeos count toward the IFR. But if they're not going to cross the border and they just want to stay home in Canada, there's still a really nice finals for them to qualify for. And then along the way, ERQ, Joey Tardif in Quebec, came on board and brought his rodeos. And now just this year, the Fishers, Matt Fisher and his brother and family joined as stock contractors. And I think they produced 5 rodeos this year and brought those into the fold. And so it's been kind of slow, steady growth. One of the things that we wanted to do was grow the membership along with the number of rodeos, instead of just trying to have 40 rodeos year one or 50 when there wasn't enough, contestants to support those rodeos. So as the membership grew, you never have the perfect mix, but you try to make sure you have enough members or contestants to service the rodeos as well. And so it's been a good fit and good partners up there to work with, and we've seen a lot of growth, not only in number of rodeos and number of members, but the prize money at the rodeos has grown. St. Tite being the largest, but they have the Canada Cup the first weekend and add 10,000 an event, and then come back the next week and have the I guess you'd say regular IPRA sanctioned rodeo with 15,000 added per event. And so it's a very, very sizable rodeo, and as you saw, the production of it and stuff is second to none. It's quite an experience.
Oh, it absolutely is. Yeah, no, we had a great time up there. I was looking at the standings this morning, the annual standings, and our listeners, you can find those on the IPRA website. You can watch and see who's competing in each of these events. And one thing that stood out for me, Dale, were those Canadian connections. Are you seeing a bit of an increase in the number of Canadians that are qualifying for the IFR?
Absolutely, and as we gain rodeos up there and the membership grows, the natural progression is that more of them will qualify for the IFR. And so now, unfortunately, 2020, when we all dealt with COVID around the globe, but Canada, I don't know if they were hit harder as far as number of cases, but the country shut down a lot more than the U.S. did, and stayed shut down longer. And so 2020, there were very few, if any, Canadians qualified. I think Cody Musso did because he was in the U.S. when things shut down, and he had some sort of a visa or something to stay in the U.S. and so he rodeoed in the U.S. and qualified. But he is a Canadian, and there was a couple of exceptions like that, but primarily no Canadians made it that year because there was no activity up there. They weren't allowed to have any rodeos, and then 2021 came back and they had some rodeos, but it was still not a full schedule, and a few more Canadians qualified, but not as many as what we had before that. Then last year things were, 2022, I guess, back to normal, if as much as you could say that, where there was so yeah, we'll have, and I haven't looked at it this year. Of course, the year's not over till the end of November, so there'll be a little bit of changes in the standings between now and the end of November. But we very likely will have 30 or so, give or take a few, Canadians at the IFR, and that's a pretty good percentage, and great opportunity for them, and it's raised since I first went up there to Canada and competed like at St. Tite. The level of competition has been raised there. I mean, there was always some in a few events, primarily the rough stock events, that were very competitive at any level. But I've really seen a change in the timed event competition up there in the last, 20, 25 years, that because they've been exposed to people that did it better or faster or whatever, and they learn from them. And there's been guys from the U.S. went up there and did schools and stuff, and the as competition, you're only as good as your competition, right? So if you could win before at a certain level, now that the bar has been raised, they've gotten better, and now there's lots of timed event contestants that are competitive at the IFR or anywhere else that come from Eastern Canada. It's really I've seen a lot of progress there.
Perfect. And some of the New York connections, we talk a lot about the Northeast, kind of the basis of our show. In the saddle bronc riding, we got Eli Hirschberger and Ray Hotstetler that are going to be headed your way for the IFR. And then Kentucky's got two brothers, I believe, Rudy and Eli Troyer, look like they're going to get qualified in the saddle bronc riding. So exciting to see Kentucky represented down there this year.
Absolutely. And we've got several rodeos in Kentucky as well. But yeah, there's good competitors and athletes from there too.
Okay. And you talk about expansion and growing and more members and more rodeos. There's an interesting part of your website called Innovations that I found really, really interesting. 1964, you created created a board of governors, including the representatives that you talked about, stock contractors, fans, contestants, etc., that made the rules for the rodeos and for the association. And in 1961, this stood out for me, the IPRA became the first rodeo association to recognize cowgirls barrel racing as a world champion event. Way ahead of the time, 1961. And it goes on further and says women have regularly served on your board, on your governing boards. And then in 1963, you started a clinic for the education of rodeo judges with an illustrated guide or an illustrated handbook coming out in 1969. And finally, along the judging, 1996, you formed a senior pro judges program. A lot of innovation here so far in the sport of rodeo, Dale.
Yeah, and, rodeo is a very traditional sport. And I never want to get away from that because it's kind of who we are and what we are in our core and the cowboy mentality and frontier spirit and all of that. But it is a competition as well, and so you need to make improvements and advancements as you go along. And so, yeah, it people may not think about it, but in the early '60s when they started those judging clinics and one thing and another and had illustrations, that were drawn to show what a mark out is in the bareback and saddle bronc riding, and the different things, and the legal catches in the team roping, and just different things that you could illustrate. Now we're so used to the digital age that we live in. We just think about video and digital, drawings that we can do, and diagrams and stuff. Well, that wasn't a thing back then. You had to sketch something out, and make copies and that sort of thing, and hand out, and now we still print rule books, pocket-sized rule books, and we send them to all the judges and secretaries where they can keep them with them, and any other member that requests one. But like myself, I don't carry a rule book with me anymore. Mm-hmm. I download the rule book from the website to the iBooks on my iPhone, and then I just have it with me wherever I am, because I have my phone and I can look stuff up right there on my phone. That's just the way things have changed. But back then, the IPRA, then the IRA, was kind of on the forefront of forward thinking and putting some of those things in place to advance rodeo and try to make it better and more consistent, where these judges were educated, where there's still some opinion calls, right? Mm-hmm. Which horse was the hardest to ride, and which guy made the best ride, and some of that. But the more you can get everybody on the same page and thinking alike, is what that perfect spur ride should look like, and show exactly what that mark out is. It's not here and here, it's right here. Here's the area where the heels of their boots have to be, the first jump, and those things. Any of that you can do, it creates consistency. And even though you might see things a little differently than me, if we're both judging a rodeo or two different rodeos, you get a lot more consistent with education and showing people exactly what they should be looking for, and breaking down a ride, where again, you try to get some consistency, where, a horse that's a 21 pointer over here isn't a 14 pointer over there. We should all be kind of looking for the same things and create some consistency, and that's good for everybody in rodeo, fans as well as the contestants and the personnel.
You bet. And education has been part of the innovations that I'm looking at here. You established the IPRA established a Humane Activities Office in 1970, and that's to educate the fan, right? To educate the community.
Yeah, it's a combination of things. Certainly to educate the fans and the general public and people about rodeo. There's a lot of misconceptions out there, and even today, some of it's gotten better because it's easier to get information out. But with that, some of it's gotten worse because somebody that wants to attack rodeo or take a negative stance toward it, they can get false information out quicker as well. The flank strap has been a big topic of conversation over the years. And so everything from people telling people that it's hurting the horses to their genitals are involved in the flank strap things, which is 100% false. And we can prove that with whether it's photos or videos, and show where the flank strap is, and it's nothing to do with that. But it was also created to combat some of that, as well as sometimes we come under attack by politically with laws or ordinances trying to be passed and things, and so that position is also to look for things like that, because we went through, well, right now there's some legislation going on in certain parts of California. LA has had some local city government, considering banning of rodeo and equestrian sports in the city of Los Angeles. And I just saw a deal last week where San Diego is maybe considering some of that same legislation within the city. And so we don't currently sanction a rodeo in the city of LA, we try to give support to, the fight against that, because, the reality is, even if we don't have a rodeo, the PBR, I think, is the only organization that currently has an event in the city limits of LA.
Mm-hmm.
But, it won't stop there. The fear is that gives them a little traction, and then, they get some confidence and they get more people to donate to their cause, and then they expand from there. And pretty soon New York has had legislation proposed. Pre-COVID, there was a bill getting some traction, and we thought maybe was going to be heard on the floor in New York to ban certain disciplines, events of rodeo. Well, then here came COVID, and everybody's attention, politically was on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of died down. I'm on a list where I get an email every time something comes up about that. We try to keep an eye on that, and then rally support from our people to dispel those rumors, because and that misinformation, because it's what is it, the wheel that squeaks the loudest gets the grease, and sometimes that's the case, where somebody completely misinformed, and I hate to be so blunt, but out of pure ignorance, some of the things that they believe about rodeo or that they say about rodeo or other equine events and stuff, they will spread that information, and sometimes if you say it loud enough and confidently enough, people believe it to be true, and so we try to keep an eye on all those things and not pick a fight, but defend ourselves when it's appropriate.
Perfect. Okay. And also in 1966, and this some of these dates really were pretty astounding to me. In 1966, you began providing insurance for the cowboys and for the cowgirls, for the members. That had to be ahead of its time, Dale.
Well, yeah, and strangely enough, even now, 2023, you fast forward all this time, there may be some exceptions, but primarily the only ones that still do that today is the IPRA, the PRCA does, and high school and intercollegiate do, and the PBR does. But most other, I may be missing somebody, so I apologize if I am, but most of the rodeo associations still don't do that. So I have always been of a mindset that it is important to provide that. Now, if some catastrophic injury happens to somebody, you can't have enough insurance for those kinds of things. But our insurance covers that member traveling to or from or competing at or working at an IPRA sanctioned rodeo. So if you're a member and you have a truck wreck on the way to the rodeo, it will cover it. And if if you're hurt in competition, it will cover it, and so on. And then we also have an accidental death policy on all of our members that and it covers them anytime. I mean, if they were to get run over by a tractor at their house, it would the accidental death benefit would pay. And we put that in place more recently. It was an option through the insurance company that we use, an agency that we use, and we could afford to do it. And that's one of those you never want to collect on it, but tragedies do happen, unfortunately, and if they have other insurance, either on their own or through their job or through their spouse or family, then our insurance will kick in as a secondary. If they have a primary, ours will kick in as a secondary and pay their copay and deductible and ambulance ride and whatever their insurance, primary doesn't cover. Or if they don't have any other than ours, then it becomes the primary and covers the majority of it. And so try to, and it's one of those things people say, well, gosh, if you didn't have the insurance, you could sell memberships cheaper. You'd probably sell more memberships. But I think it's a good investment, and we provide that on all of our members and permit holders, and no, most of the competitors are younger people. That's
Mm-hmm.
just the nature of
Mm-hmm.
the game. And we all think we're,
Right.
bulletproof and I'm not going to get hurt and,
Yeah.
I'm tough and all that. But then when something happens,
Yep.
it's a big blessing and help to them to have some financial help.
Absolutely. No, I've heard stories. We heard one this summer. Bull rider was riding up in Pennsylvania and didn't have his own health insurance and wasn't riding for an association that had health insurance offered, that was part of it. And very,
Yeah.
very, very expensive. Very expensive. So, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And a great investment, as you said. And then let's shift just for a moment to the regional system. You were the first. The IPRA was the first to develop that regional system. You talked about that a little bit in Canada, the Canadian Cup. Can I stay local? I don't want to travel I don't want to travel all week. I just want to stay close. And having that regional system like the Northeast, like the Canadian Cup, etc. And then you have the individual regional finals, and then they all come together for the national all regional finals, Dale?
Yeah, and so we've got North America divided up into 5 regions. And so, like you said, depending on where you live, if you want to stay closer to home and just compete regionally, we try to have region finals at the end of the season in each region. And for them to qualify and go to. Now it doesn't mean you can't go to the IFR and a region finals in the same year. We have many people that do.
Mm-hmm.
The Southern Region Finals, which is Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and Kansas. The region finals is actually next weekend in Shawnee, Oklahoma. Then there'll be many contestants there that are also going to qualify or trying to qualify for the IFR. But it does give them a chance to stay closer to home and compete and qualify for finals. And the National All Region Finals, generally it can there's a little bit of leeway on the format depending on how many contestants they want in their event, but it's usually traditionally been the top 2 in each region then go to the National All Region Finals. So now we had a plan fall through this year. We're not actually having a National All Region Finals in 2023. There was a place that was very interested and we actually had it listed, and some things came to pass that they weren't able to host it this year. And so we had to cancel it, unfortunately, but I already have a very good lead on somebody next year that's very interested in hosting it. So that's one of the goals for next year, is to get that back in place. And it's another incentive, and benefit for our members to have that opportunity and qualify for it. And it, lets them still, have a finals to go to and compete at a high level against people from all over without having to, travel all over the country to get there.
Now, do those regional finals, do those points count towards the IFR, towards the year-end standings?
Well, I'm laughing because that's been a fairly recent development. And when I say recent, probably last 10 years or so, maybe 15. I lose track of time. They didn't used to. They only counted in that region standings and then toward qualifying for the National All Region Finals. Well, along the way, contestants, I guess wanted more incentive to go to them and stuff. So what we did was we still have a region standings that we track for just the people in that region, but it's just a little bit of a twist on that. We have a region tour standings, which means the definition of it is, it's those same region rodeos in the Southern region, Southeast, Northeast, whatever region you're talking about, but the tour, that tracks the points of anybody that competes in that region. So even if you're from New York and you come and go to some rodeos in Oklahoma and win points in the Southern region, they still track those points. And so by doing that, then those region finals or region tour finales, as we call them now, if they have that format, then they do count in the world standings. And so again, it was another incentive for the contestants to reward the ones that support the rodeos in that region,
Mm-hmm.
but also another incentive for them to go and compete at their region tour finale and gain more points toward the IFR. So it can be a kind of a two-way street. If you still want to just rodeo regionally and stay close and not try to qualify for the IFR, you can go to your region tour finale that way. Or if you want to, and it's like the Northeast and Central region border each other. So Pennsylvania, New York, and those states are and Ohio are in the Northeast region, but then Indiana, Illinois, those states are in the Central region. And so if you live in that, kind of Ohio area, you might go to both rodeos in both regions and they're handy for you and still stay somewhat close to home. You might qualify for both those region finales and be able to go to both of them.
Okay. I like that. Okay. And then talking about the International Finals Rodeo, reading that the first IFR was held in February 1971, had a total payoff of $47,000 as the finals for the 1970 season. And that was held in Tulsa. And then it looked like it moved to Albuquerque for a bit, for a couple years maybe.
Just 1 year. I think IFR 3, I think, was the only one in Albuquerque.
In Albuquerque. Then it came back to Tulsa. And then it came to Oklahoma City, and it was in the Myriad Convention Center. And then it moved to the State Fair Arena in Oklahoma City. And then ultimately, it looks like in 2003, it moved to the Ford Center in downtown Oklahoma. So in present day, we know that it's going to be held this January at the Lazy E Arena in Guthrie, Oklahoma. We'll get into that just a little bit. So here's the question that I have as I listen to the national regional finals, as I listen to the IFR and all of this, IFYR, let's throw that in. Does your home office, your crew, do they organize the IFR?
Yeah, so the IFR is the only rodeo that we, the IPRA, actually puts on ourselves.
Okay.
And so we're the committee and everything. So the board is involved both, in serving some positions there, as well as we have a stock selection committee that selects the horses and bulls that will perform there and all of those things. But yeah, we're on the hook for that one. We put it all on ourselves, and so it's a big undertaking. We have a fairly small full-time staff.
Yeah.
There's currently three ladies in the office, and I'm in and out of there. I have an office and a desk there, and I'm there part of the time, and I work from home some, and I travel some, and then we have a project manager, which is mostly like a field rep, Ronnie Williams. He lives in Texas, and we're in the process of adding to our staff. We have a gentleman named Jared Higbee, who at one time was the marketing director for National High School. He kind of got away from rodeo a little bit as far as that, and was teaching in college and started a family, and now he's gotten back involved. And so he just recently came on board and to work on sponsorships and business development and expansion and some things. So he's still kind of getting his feet wet a little bit, but he's on board. And we're in the process of hiring a new communications director, which will be, everything from social media and website and all those things. So all of that, you got to stay up with the times, and we need more help on those fronts. And so we'll be adding some pieces, but fairly small staff that puts on a large event, and so it takes everybody, kind of pulling in the same direction to make it happen.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this. All the contract personnel you're talking about, judges, secretary, announcers, timers, pickup men, barrel men, all of that. But also during the rodeo, that 4 days in the Lazy Arena in Guthrie, you've got a Western trade show that goes on. There's an annual bucking stock sale that happens. There's also a Contract Act showcase that is held. Then you've got your senior pro rodeo judges clinics. And then finally, and I'm probably missing some stuff here, Dale, Miss Rodeo USA contestants are there for a full schedule during the IFR. I'm looking at this thinking 4 people, 5 people, this is a crazy amount of stuff to get organized. It seems like it'd take a couple people just to do something like organize the Western Trade Show.
Well, and so that's where we bring other people and pieces in. So
Okay.
a lady named Tammy Hyatt, who isn't a full-time staff member, but a longtime member of the IPRA and former board member. She served as the barrel racing director, years ago and stuff, and been around rodeo for a long time. And so she has managed the trade show for us. I forget how many years now. Well, we were still in Oklahoma City, and since we've made the move to Guthrie to the Lazy E, and so I'm very fortunate to have people like her. So she's the point of contact for that and organizes that and manages that for us as a private contractor. And then the Contract Act showcase. Our Contract Acts director, contract personnel director, they're in charge of that. Now they get other people to help them, but so that is about what it sounds like. So, announcers and specialty acts and comedy acts and things like that can enter the showcase. And so there on Saturday at the Lazy E, we'll have it's almost like a performance just for those contract personnel. So it's a draw. An announcer will draw a comedy act or a dress act, and then they'll get together just like they would if they showed up at a rodeo and they're working with a new announcer, and they would get together and go over their script and music and one thing and another, and then they'll perform. And so it's open to the public, but it's primarily for rodeo producers and committees to come and watch and see what's out there for new talent or somebody that they may not be aware of. They're looking for some new entertainment at their rodeo, and it's a great place. And anybody can come. I mean, we have seasoned veterans come, but it's really a good place for some of the new up and comers to get their name out there and be seen and show what they can do and book some work and so that's because most committees, not all of them, but the majority of them, it's a civic group or organization putting it on for a fundraiser. It's a Lions Club, a Kiwanis Club, or a church or school group or something putting a rodeo on for a fundraiser. And so they're not rodeo people, and they put on one rodeo a year, and they rely heavily on their stock contractor to provide the pieces they need, right? The livestock and maybe a portable arena if it's needed, or the different pieces. And then we advertise it to our members to get the contestants to enter and come and have the competition. But they don't interact with a lot of rodeo people or see other acts or announcers and things, and they may not know what else is out there. So it gives them an opportunity to see what else is out there other than what they've had at their rodeo or the neighboring rodeo that they may have went to. And so it's a good mix there for them to see everybody. And then the judges clinic and all of that is part of because we have our IPRA annual convention going on the same week as the IFR. It's a good time to have it because get everybody to come and then they can attend the IFR while they're there. But we have a committee seminar, judges clinic, as you mentioned. There's meetings with the contestants, a general membership meeting, lots of information to give out. And while we don't have everybody there, it's a pretty good cross section of people from all over the country and all over the North America that come. And so even if somebody wasn't there, those people go back home and in their circle kind of share what they heard and learned there. And so it's a good place to educate people as well as get feedback from them on what they like and don't like and would like to see change. So
You bet. Perfect. And what a good full 4 days you guys have put together. So for our listeners, if you are interested, Guthrie, Oklahoma, January 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 4 days, go down and see some great rodeo. The Contract Act Showcase, if you have an opportunity, go see it. I believe it's free to get into. Go see it, and just it's pretty cool to see all the various different acts that are out there that are going up and down the road right now. So if you have that opportunity. Let's talk about a great big topic, Dale. Rodeo Logistics purchases the IPRA in January of 2023. Talk a little bit about this. I know Rodeo Logistics, they've got all kinds of computer software, open stalls, rodeo entry tools. They're involved with the IFYR. Talk a little bit about this. This was a big thing.
Yeah, so when it really started a few years ago, time sometimes seems like it goes so fast and then sometimes so slow. But even when we were considering moving to Guthrie, to the Lazy E, I had met with the staff and management there at the Lazy E, and they kind of made their pitch for us to move up there, and it was very interesting, and there's some good possibilities there. It's a private owned facility, so there's advantages to that. You're dealing with a private entity that can make decisions and work with you and one thing and another, and so. And as we were moving along in that discussion, I came to meet Gary McKinney, who owns the Lazy E, and so he owns other things. Very successful in the oil and gas business, and then he team ropes himself. Never did get an opportunity to rodeo much because he was so busy business wise. But he's a cowboy, he's a rancher, and he loves rodeo and the Western way of life. And so the horse racing, they're very involved with horse racing with Reliance Ranches and Lazy Ranches. Have a massive horse racing business as well, and so anyway, as I was talking with Mr. McKinney, and we were talking about the IFR and moving it up there, we were talking about creating more of a partnership than just a tenant facility relationship where we're just renting the facility, and so that sort of moved along to discussions about the history of the IPRA and the structure of it, and so on and so forth. And so Mr. McKinney is very interested in adding benefits to rodeo contestants primarily. Now, with that goes benefits for contractors and committees and other things as well. But he has a soft place in his heart, I guess you'd say, for these rodeo contestants that dedicate a big portion of their life to rodeo and may not have a lot to show for it when they're done. It's certainly different than most other major sports. Football, baseball, basketball, and all those things where people are under contract and getting guaranteed paychecks. They still have to perform to maintain their contracts and renew and get more money. But it's a different animal completely than rodeo. Golf would probably be the closest comparison, just because it's an individual sport and they compete for what they win. Now, golf has gotten so big, most of them have major sponsors, and they may be making more in sponsor dollars and appearances than what they are, pro-ams and things, and what they're actually winning on the golf course. But rodeo has fallen behind on that. And so one of his goals is to try to make it better for those contestants, where they have more opportunities to win more money without more expense and a lot more travel and stuff, because travel is a huge part of rodeo, and to try to get to 100 rodeos or whatever the case might be, that takes a lot of time away from home and expense and away from family and all those things. So he also has the WCRA, which is the World Champions Rodeo Alliance, is another entity that he has. And so Rodeo Logistics, as you said, is a software technology company. And so one of the other things that he saw that was lacking in rodeo and Western sports was technology, because the Apples and IBMs and those people weren't focused on rodeo and Western sports the same as they were other businesses. And so he brought together, he built a company that has programmers and tech people that work on stuff that's geared for that sort of thing. So I think you mentioned open stalls. So it's a little bit like hotels.com for horses, right? You can get on there, and if you're traveling somewhere, you can find somewhere to book a stall to stop and let your horse rest for the night, or if you're and some events, they have the stall management. So at the IFYR, for instance, we use it there. So those contestants that are coming, that are bringing a horse, they reserve their stall and their campsite through open stalls, and then we have all that data enlisted, and they can prepay and all of that, and then we can manage the stalls that Doug is in stall 759, and assign the stalls and all that. So it's quite a system, and so he was developing those things. So to kind of get back to the IPRA part of it, he was interested in working with the IPRA, or potentially acquiring the IPRA, to implement some of that software and ultimately make it better, more user-friendly, and more benefits for IPRA members to use. And so that's how we got started down that discussion, and it went on for quite some time. And then again, here came COVID, and that didn't change either one of our focus or goal to try to figure out how to make this work, but it did just slow things down on sheer numbers. There was not very many rodeos going on, and it affected memberships as well. And so then as we got past that and moved forward, and it always takes a lot of legalese to get in there and make sure it can be done and what you want to be done, and so on and so forth. So yeah, we rolled out actually at the IFR last January, and then acquired the necessary membership vote to approve the acquisition and all of those things, and move forward with that. And so and again, it's mainly to add innovation to rodeo and streamline some processes. We've kind of just started the tip of the iceberg so far, and we never want to make it too complicated where it's hard for people to rodeo, or make it more difficult for them. But the way we move information from rodeos to our office is badly outdated. So the secretary works the rodeo on paper. Some will use a laptop to do some of their stuff, but we're doing that, and we have all these forms, and the posted sheets and the draw, and the results and all those things. And then the secretary, mostly handwritten, then she either has to mail all that information to the IPRA office, or scan it and email it, or fax it. And so it's very outdated on the way information can move these days. Now, some of the challenges are we have rodeos in locations that don't have good internet. And so you have to have the best of both worlds. You have to have it where they can work the rodeo offline, but then when they get internet, they can upload the information and get it to our office and stuff. So we're just getting into that part of it, even though it's been most of the year that we've been working together and on it. So there'll continue to be improvements on that can do a lot of things. Get the information there faster and easier, get the standings updated faster and easier and more accurately. We want to get where we're moving money to the contestants more efficiently, because if you go compete at a rodeo on the first night and it's a 3-day rodeo and you leave there, then you find out a few days later you won something, they sent the money to your house, or you hopefully you had somebody pick it up, and there's all those things.
Yep.
And there's just again, in 2023 and soon to be 2024, there's much more efficient ways to make all that happen, and rodeo has been behind. And so we want to streamline that and make it more user friendly for contestants and our members to live in this world and navigate it.
It's great. In 1997, you created the central entry system, which was still phoning in. You talk about getting on a bank of payphones at a truck stop to try to get your truck entered. And if I'm reading this right, this rodeo entry tool, it's got a dashboard and it's got event listings. And if I'm not mistaken, I can enter multiple. I'm reading this. I have the option to enter multiple disciplines multiple times in one single transaction. So I'm not even picking up a phone to call. I'm doing it on my mobile device. And then it looks like I've created my own profile, which has got my personal information, where you can send the money to, social media associations that I'm attached to, career earnings, and all that sort of thing. So it's about time. An excellent, good job.
Well, and so since that press release and information came out earlier this year, then along the way, Rodeo Logistics also acquired a majority interest in Next Gen Rodeo, which is an app-based system to enter rodeos. And so in April of 2023, we switched to so Next Gen, which is part of Rodeo Logistics, is taking our entries. And so a lot of those same things that you just named are in place, but so now it's just an app on your phone. Now, there's a number that you can call if somebody either doesn't have the capability of downloading an app or, it doesn't have a smartphone or whatever the case might be. They can still call and enter. But the overwhelming majority of people, again, because rodeo primarily on the competition side is a young person's sport, just the nature of it. And so, I jokingly say anybody under 30, and it may be 40 now, they don't really want to talk to anybody anyway. They just want to get on an app and punch it in. And so now you just download that app and set up your profile in there, and you can enter any and all IPRA rodeos right through that app. And the entries are open for 5 days. They open on Wednesday morning and they close Sunday at 5:00. And so you have 5 days to enter. So you don't have the trying to eliminate, again, it doesn't matter what day in the past, the entries were usually open for 1 day with a few exceptions. And then it would never fail. The next morning, people are calling the stock contractor or our office or the entry system that we were using and saying, I missed the books.
Right.
And so now, not that doesn't ever happen now, but they're open for 5 days. And if Saturday night you're at a rodeo and you're a little short on funds, I don't know if I'm going to enter next week, and I win something, or I'm talking to my buddies there at the rodeo and go, hey, let's go to Attica, New York next week. You want to go? Sure. They can get on their phone at midnight and open up that app and enter the rodeo, and they're, good to go. And so again, trying to make it more convenient and more accessible and user friendly to get entered at IPRA rodeos.
Yeah. And just to be clear, you can enter multiple people. So imagine back in the days of running your truck. I got 6 steer wrestlers going down the road. I want to enter all 6 of them. Can I do that on my mobile app?
Yeah, and so there are restrictions on how many you can enter in a buddy group. So it's 4 per discipline per event. So the reason that's in place is if so that sort of one buddy group doesn't fill a whole performance, or we've kind of monopolized it a little bit. Like if I could enter 10 steer wrestlers in one group, one buddy group, and keep them together, we would fill Saturday night at that rodeo, and then nobody else got an opportunity to go then. So there's a limit on how many you can enter per event on one one buddy group, but yeah, you can. And so there's no more stopping at the truck stop and getting on the payphone, if they even have a payphone in a
Right.
truck stop anymore.
Right.
And we're all driving down the road and we can do it on our smartphone, and it's a draw. So there's not that mad rush to at 9 a.m. when the book's open. Yeah. I got to get through by 9:05 or I'm not going to get up when I want. Yeah. You can just anytime in that 5-day period, you can give your preferences, and then it's going to draw. If you enter more IPRA rodeos, the advantage there is it's going to try to get you up at the maximum amount of rodeos. So it tries its very best not to foul you and put you up at 2 rodeos at the same time, and some things like that, again, to make it more user friendly and get more people to more rodeos.
Yeah, love it. Absolutely love it. I listen to your stories and how what kind of an act it was to try to get the truck entered. I can't imagine driving down the road now with you being able to run your smartphone. And you got to put out a PSA there. You don't work to enter your rodeo while you're driving, right?
That's right. You have your buddy that's riding in the passenger seat. You got your co-pilot over there entering the rodeos while you're driving, or you let him drive while you're doing it.
Yeah.
But
that's the official stance of the IPRA, right?
Absolutely.
And then technology in rodeo. We talked a bit about this last time. In the upcoming IFR, this coming January, for the first time ever, you're going to have the Instant Replay Review Challenge. And very cool. We've seen it in the PBR. We've seen the effects of it in the PBR. And I just got to come at it from this angle. I got to ask, in the old days, back in the 80s and 90s, video cameras were actually banned, right? So what has changed? I mean, now you got cell phone recording, you got social media. How is this possible?
Well, so and I think we touched on the animal issues part of rodeo and some of the enemies that try to use things against us and stuff, and so I think that's where a lot of the combination of that, people not wanting people to video at rodeos that are going to try to twist things around and use it against us, but also people were concerned about media rights and things. When you used to, I don't even know if they do it anymore. It used to be when you watched a football game, it would say this is the this is the exclusive property of the National Football League. Any unauthorized use, but they would threaten you that the FBI was going to show up at your house and arrest you if you recorded the football game or something. Now we live in a DVR world and streaming and all these things that you can get things all the time, anytime, and so some of that old logic and way of thinking went by the way, and it used to be people. The other thing was the convenience for the people that bought a ticket to watch, because cameras used to be bigger, and the big guy sitting in front of you pulls his video camera up and puts it on his shoulder, and now he's blocking people's view and those things. Now we all have a camera in our pocket, and it's very small and compact, and so people are videoing with their cell phones, and some of these cell phones have cameras on them that are high resolution and pretty awesome videos. and so it just became, where there's no fight there anymore, right? You can't keep people from, you can, now if somebody goes to broadcasting something and, streaming a whole rodeo and stuff, then you can still, shut that down or keep from doing that. But so all of that's changed, but the replay part of it now, you mentioned the PBR was kind of at the forefront of replay within rodeo or Western sports. And so the WCRA that we talked a little about, it does some stuff with the PBR. PBR helps them with their media rights and some other things, and there's a collaboration there. And so when the WCRA started having these big money events that they produce, they implemented instant replay or challenge replay that's using the PBR system, where now because the PBR is strictly bull riding, they had to do, modify some things with more cameras and more camera angles and stuff, because you can also challenge certain things in the timed events. And so you had to put more cameras in place to get all of that, covered. But then there's an opportunity if a contestant feels like, the wrong call was made, or, they were, whatever it might be. You can challenge whether the barrier worked correctly. If they call a +10, +5 in the WCRA, it's +10 in the IPRA for breaking the barrier, you can challenge that. If you nodded and the gate didn't open properly, there's a camera position to show when you nodded and when the gate actually opened, because it's supposed to open in a timely manner when you nod and call for the calf or steer and things like that. Fouls in the rough stock events, whether the bull hipped himself or fouled your leg, or, all the different things that are involved in rodeo. But in the past, you just had a judge or a couple of judges, and they're not perfect and they might miss something. But if you feel strongly that the wrong call was made, you can't challenge a score. You can't overturn the score that they give you, but certainly a disqualification or a penalty or a foul, you can challenge that. And so then we'll go to the contestant initiates that. There's a flag that they throw. There's one at the timed event end and one at the rough stock end, and they throw that flag, and then they challenge it. They tell the judge what their challenge is. I was fouled, or my steer fell down before he got to the score line. That's why it caused me to break the barrier. The steer fell before he got to the, different, there's specific things that you can challenge. And so then we have the technology where there's a monitor for the judge to look at. And, we never want to drag rodeo out or, make it too long for the fans. But with the amount of money that's at stake and stuff, and titles on the line, you want to, this isn't a fit for every rodeo, because you have to have the video and capability and technology to do it. But at the IFR, we can do it. And so they'll have a monitor at each end. And so if they challenge it, then the judge can look at it right then and make that decision. It usually takes a matter of seconds to look at that. It's not going to hold up the rodeo for 30 minutes or anything like that. And I think, and I hope, and what I've witnessed at some WCRA events, the announcers are explaining what's going on to the in-house crowd or TV if it's on TV. And I haven't been anywhere where the crowd gets restless or loses interest. I think they want the call to be right just as much as the contestant and the judges do. So I think they understand, and other sports have implemented it, right? I mean, they're used to watching an NFL game, and if there's a challenge, there's a bit of a break in the action while they determine if the right call was made, and that's the ultimate goal. And so we're gonna implement it at the IFR this year, and go from there. Where it goes from there, if more rodeos have the technology and the capability, I would love to see it expand, to more rodeos. Right now, we're going to start with it at the IFR because we can control it and we have the capability to do it correctly there.
So will the fan be able to, is there a large screen set up inside Lazy or screens that the fans will be able to see replays, I should say, and see what the judge is looking at?
Yes. And so we have a video replay screen there. So in early October, I went to WCRA event in Tryon, North Carolina, and there was a couple challenges that weekend while I was there, and one of them was where a contestant felt like in the tie down roping felt like the gate didn't open correctly when he nodded. There was a big hesitation, when he nodded till the gate opened, and so he challenged it, and he actually pulled up and didn't run the calf. He felt like there was such a hesitation. He declared himself and pulled up. But so the judge was unsure whether the gate opened correctly or not. Anyway, the contestant challenged it. They went to the replay. we could see it right there on the board. They showed that camera angle where you saw him nod, and there was a big hesitation, and the gate opened. He started out of the corner and then pulled up and said, "Hey, I was fouled, or it didn't work correctly," and so they could see it on the replay,
Okay.
and so he got a rerun and was given another calf to run that run the extra, and I think in that case he ended up placing and moving on in the competition, and it was done correctly, and so anyway, that's the kind of things we're trying to. You're still going to have a human element in
Mm-hmm.
rodeo, certainly, and you can't take that completely out. But if we have the chance to get the call right, I think that should always be a goal.
Absolutely. No, I'm very excited for this. It's going to be great to watch. And for our listeners, the IFR 54 is January 2024. 4 days, January 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th. It's at the Lazy E Arena in Guthrie, Oklahoma. I will put up links in the listener notes that you can click on and go get your tickets. Go check this out. Now, the other thing before we move on past the IFR and Rodeo Logistics, more money in this year's IFR for both the stock contractors and for the rodeo contestants. You want to talk a little bit about that, Dale?
Yeah, another one of the conversations with Mr. McKinney when we talked about this was the need for that growth and more money in our members' pockets. And so, obviously we're trying to sell more tickets and raise more sponsor dollars and all those things that you do to offset the cost of rodeo and increase the revenue side. But so right from the beginning, made a commitment to raise the prize money to $500,000, and that's no contestant entry fees. The contestants at the IFR don't pay an entry fee. All that $500,000 is put up by the IPRA for them to win, and then we raise the stock lease for the bucking horses and bulls significantly. So there's going to be about $250,000 more this January that goes in our members' pockets, contestants and stock contractors, than what there was in January of 2023. So in 1 year, there's a $250,000 increase between those two pieces.
Wow.
And there's also some increases for some of the personnel and stuff as well. So it'll exceed that. But right off the bat, there's that much more. And again, that's we're not going to rest on that or say we're good now. We don't need to worry about that. The goal is to continue to grow and increase that and increase those benefits.
Wow, there has been a lot going on, Dale. I can't imagine how busy you must have been this year. Yeah, traveling about, as you said, WCRA, going up to St. Tite, competing in a golf tournament that you had to win, for goodness sakes. You've been busy. You've been all over, and this going on. It is exciting times for the IPRA, and thank you for your leadership.
Well, thank you. It's been interesting for sure. I've been involved for a long time on different levels, whether it's a contestant or on the management side and stuff. I really feel like we have an opportunity now to see some of the growth that myself and many others have always wanted. We have more resources available thanks to Mr. McKinney and his companies that we can, it's just like the software side of it. For me could somebody else do this? Sure. If the IPRA had enough money, could we go hire some programmers to try to, write the software that rodeo badly needs and stuff? Absolutely. There's people out there that can do that, but it's very expensive and it's a huge initial investment. And so to have the resources that we have, with him and sort of the sister companies that we have, it's a great opportunity, and I'm really excited about the future.
You bet. Lots to be excited about. More money, more technology, more innovation. Absolutely. And is there anything, Dale, we haven't talked about that you'd like to raise for our listeners or inform our listeners of?
I guess one thing is just a little explanation on the WCRA, because some people will have seen that, and some will be unfamiliar with it. But it's World Champions Rodeo Alliance, and as I've said, it's a sister company, if you will, to the IPRA, but managed completely different. There were some rumors the WCRA bought the IPRA and it took over the IPRA and stuff. That's not at all what happened. Now, we've had an alliance with them since it started. They are not a membership organization or a sanctioning body. They put on, this year three. Their model is 3 or 4 large paying events a year, and so this year they had Corpus Christi, Texas in the spring, and they had Tryon, North Carolina, the first part of October, and they're actually going to have a WCRA event the week before the IFR at the Lazy E. And so that platform is they have an app and stuff, World Champions Rodeo Alliance, WCRA, and you download that app and set up a profile, and you can nominate the rodeos or the jackpots or the competitions that you're already going to. You don't have to enter more rodeos or anything like that. So you can take the IPRA rodeos that you're going to, and you pay a small nomination fee if you want to count that rodeo, and then you can qualify. So they're going to pay out a little over $400,000 the week before the IFR. Between the 2 weekends, we're going to pay out about $1 million to athletes in 10 days there at the Lazy E. And so, and you can compete in both, or one or the other. You don't have to do both, but it's an opportunity. And I think there's some real future there as well. Because again, you don't have to go to more rodeos or more jackpots. If you have a local team roping jackpot or barrel racing that you're going to, but you want to nominate that, if it's not on their schedule, you can get it added to their schedule and nominate that event, and then qualify for a $400,000 plus rodeo. And then one of the other exciting things that they do is they have the Triple Crown of Rodeo. If you win 3 of those major events in a row in any discipline, it could be in the bareback riding, the steer wrestling, whatever. If you win 3 of them in a row, which isn't an easy feat, but it can and has been done, you get $1 million bonus. And so, that's last December in Fort Worth. Yep. They had the Cowtown Christmas event there shortly before Christmas. And R.C. Landingham, a bareback rider from California, that was his 3rd win in a row, and they handed him a check for $1 million besides what he won at the rodeo, and really life-changing money. And so the opportunities are there. Again, not to go to more rodeos and spend more time traveling, but use what you're already doing to have an opportunity to really run at some big money. And you can count up to $10,000 in points that you win at WCRA rodeos toward the IFR and in our world standing. So so it's a two-way street. There's advantages both ways, and we had contestants in Tryon last month that did well and won considerable amount of money and helped improve their position toward the IFR and toward IPRA World Championships. And so anyway, more things coming and more opportunities.
Perfect. And have you sat down and said, only if these opportunities would only been available when you were rodeoing hard?
Well, yeah, it's hard not to,
yeah,
the technology part of it, certainly, that wouldn't have, it wasn't available when I started, and now it is. So we need to capitalize on that. And the money, everything's more expensive now too. The revenue side of it needs to greatly increase because, I hate to talk about the good old days, but when I moved to Oklahoma, fuel was still less than $1 a gallon, and you could buy a new pickup for $10,000, and it's just a completely different world. And now, a new crew cab pickup's closer to $100,000, and, diesel fuels, depending on where you live, $3 to $5 a gallon. And, it's just, and the trailers are, everything's more expensive. And so, while we didn't have the opportunities to win as much money back then as what we do now,
Yeah.
I hate to say I would trade the experience I had
Right.
and the times that
No.
I lived in and competed in, for anything. It had its own advantages as well, and so I'm thankful for all of it.
Yeah, and you talk about the money, and there's a saying, money makes the world go round and round. You've got great major sponsors, OG&E, Ram, Wrangler, Montana Silversmith, Loves, just great sponsors. So I just got to say, you wear so many darn hats, you got to keep so many people happy, and there's so many things you got to be involved with. So well done.
Well, when I was first elected as president, I remember I went to they made the announcement, and then that Sunday morning during the IFR, I went to church service, and they're at the IFR, and they introduced me as the new president, one thing and another, and I assured them of a couple of things. That one, really just one thing, as long as I was in charge, we'd still say the prayer at the beginning of the performance at the IFR, and if they just at that time, because it was an elected position, if they didn't like the job I was doing, they had two options, and it was either vote me out, or impeach me, or I guess assassinate me. But I would prefer you don't choose that option. So I'm still here. Nobody's taken that option, although some may want to wring my neck sometimes. But it whatever mistakes I've made, it's been because I thought it was best for the organization, and I've always tried to lead that way and not hold anybody else to any higher standard than I would hold myself to.
You bet. Well, the proof's in the pudding. We look at where the IPRA is today, and its future looks very, very bright from where we're sitting. So thank you for a great conversation today. I know we covered a lot of territory, and you know what? There's a whole bunch more territory to cover too. I know there just is. But thank you for everything today, Dale. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it, and I'm glad you're able to with this platform get some information out there and tell people a little about the inside rodeo stuff.
Inside rodeo stuff, absolutely. All right. We hope that you enjoy our podcast as much as we enjoy doing it. We hope that you found this information in this episode useful and helpful. If you do, please share it with your friends. Help us spread the word. Share it on Facebook. Look for Beyond the Chutes on any of the major streaming platforms. Search for Beyond the Chutes and follow us. And if you would, rate and review us. Leave us some comments. It all helps us build our product. Remember, check out the New York State Rodeo Museum Facebook group page and become a member. And we'd like to say thank you to Parasite Systems for their support with our podcast. Parasite System is a push-button parasitic diagnostic system for pasture animals, horses, cattle, goats, sheep, and chickens, and for your companion animals, your dogs and your cats. You can find them at parasitesystems.com. And we have a coupon, BTC023. That's BTC023 to get 50% off your specimen kits and testing. This is Beyond the Chutes with Dale Yerigan. Until next time, this is Doug Simcox. Thank you for listening.